This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode number 30. I am Craig, and over there,
Chris.
Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Not too bad myself. It's been a little while since I've seen your beardy face.
I'm here in the flesh.
Yeah, it's nice.
I still live. I'm not a myth.
All right, so today, Chris, we're going to be talking about starting a business in a questionable economy. I am really fascinated by this topic and fascinated by a few of the notes that you sent over, so I'm interested to get to some of these things. But why don't you intro the topic for us just a little bit?
Yeah, today we're going to talk a little bit about, I've heard a lot of people talking. There's been a lot of noise in the industry, people commenting on some of our Facebook pages and on our websites about the state of the economy. So I want to talk a little bit about, kind of where we're at, why the economy is the way that it is, specifically the trucking industry, because it's kind of its own little animal in and of itself inside the economy, and what I think has caused us to be where we're at and kind of where I see things going. And then really use that to kind of boil into, is it okay to start a business when the economy is questionable? You don't know what's going to be happening with it. Is it a good economy? Is it strong? Is it bad, soft? And, there's really pros and cons of both. There's pros and cons of starting a business when things are good. There's pros and cons of starting it when things are not so good. And we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. But before we get into all of that, I do want to remind people, HaulinAssetsLLC.com is where you can get the show notes for this and other episodes. MotorCarrierHQ.com is where you can go get some of the tools that we talk about on many of these episodes. Anyway, I think that covers our bases on that. So, Chris, tell me a little bit about life on the road. Anything interesting happening?
The weather's definitely changing. It's I got into what I thought was a little bit early of a snowstorm. I got caught in Denver in the end of October, about the last week of October. It was a big, huge snowstorm that came through. It was kind of fortuitous because I timed it pretty well, not totally intentionally, but drove into Denver, got there right as kind of the storm was starting to hit. So only about the last 2 hours of my drive had any kind of precipitation coming from the east into Denver. Get into Denver kind of early in the morning, and I was supposed to do 3 drops in Denver later that night and then go and deliver the rest of the load into Salt Lake City, I think the following day. So anyway, it snowed 12 inches. End of October, it snows 12 inches.
Yeah, it was a crazy week, even here in Salt Lake.
Yeah, and it was cold too. The high that day was like 10 degrees. So it got super cold. And it was my first time driving in the snow. Luckily, like I said, I was doing all the deliveries at night, so there wasn't a whole lot of traffic on the road. I was able to kind of take my time. But I did make a good winter rookie mistake.
And what was that?
Well, apparently it's not a great idea to, I was driving in, like I said, I hit that precipitation. So it was wet, cold, and I parked the truck, set the brakes like I always do. And apparently it's not a good idea to set the brakes right after you've been driving in wet conditions and it's going to freeze.
It'll ice over, yeah.
It actually froze the brakes and the wheels. And so I had to, break them apart when I got going again that night. Yeah. So apparently the best thing to do when you're in that kind of a situation is try to stop on a flat spot where you can throw some chocks out on the wheels and then just let your brakes cool with them not engaged so they don't freeze.
Interesting. I've never heard that before.
I hadn't either, but
a bunch of vets are laughing at you right now, right?
I'm sure a bunch of them might. Like I said, if you're trying to learn how to drive a truck or the techniques of driving a truck, this is not the podcast for you. I'm good at the business side and I'm learning the driving side. So,
and this is also probably not one of those things that they teach you.
No, it's
learned by hard experience.
Yeah, not in the truck driving school. I definitely didn't learn that.
That's funny. Okay, so would you say that you know more about the weather now that you've been driving a truck? Do you pay more attention to it than you used to?
Absolutely. Before I leave on a trip, I try to keep a gauge on, there's a couple websites that I use, and try to keep a gauge on what's happening over the next 3 to 4 days along the route that I'm going to be traveling on. In fact, the trip I just got back from, I diverted my route just a little bit and went further north than I was anticipating, added about 100 miles or so to my route to avoid a weather front.
Nice. Okay. Well, there's got to be an app for that, right?
There are a few apps for that.
There's always an app for that.
There's always an app for that.
All right. So, Chris, let's talk about the topic today, which is starting a business in what you said was a questionable economy. Not even necessarily a bad economy. But maybe let's start in on this a little bit. What do you mean by this?
So I kind of want to start a little bit off with kind of where the market is right now and kind of what's got us to where it is. So if we take a little bit of a step back and we talk about the Great Recession. The Great Recession happened, kind of started in 2017, ended in 2009. But the recovery has been a lot slower than most. It's been longer, but it's been slower. And so freight volumes and rates have kind of steadily increased. Rates not as much as volume. The volume really has steadily increased since 2009.
Thank you, Amazon.
Thank you, Amazon. Yeah, that's probably a big part of it. But nothing crazy. There has been steady growth, but not what you would probably consider robust growth. So things just kind of pittered along like that until really about 2018. So 2018 was actually just a phenomenal year as far as trucking rates go. Rates got really, really good. It got really easy to make money. Everybody was kind of making money hand over fist. And you kind of, to fail or to have things happen, you really kind of almost had to try for it because, you didn't have to put too much smarts into it or effort into it. You didn't really have to do, you could pretty much just drive a truck and make money.
And make money,
It was pretty easy in 2018.
Okay, so 2018 was a pretty good year. How about this year? How are things looking now?
So 2019 hasn't been nearly as good of a year. The rates went kind of in the toilet. Not in the toilet compared to 2018. They're nothing like they were last year, but they're more like in line with what was happening in 2017. So things in 2018 shot up really high, and then they came crashing back down in 2019. So I think it feels like it's more of a crunch than it really is because it got up so high and then it came back down. But it's really not too crazy too far off from where things were, even one full year ago or 2 years ago.
So are you saying 2018 was kind of a spike, and 2019 feels a little bit down because of that, but it's more of a return to normal from the few years before that?
Yeah, exactly. Yep,
okay.
That's a good
way
to
that
put
makes
it.
sense. That makes sense.
And I've got a pretty good idea of why that happened. I think one of the biggest contributing factors is just there is now a lot more trucks on the road in 2019 than there had been in the past. And if you kind of go through the numbers and look at it, it kind of becomes a little bit more clear, and we can kind of paint a clearer picture. So the what's considered the Class 8 truck orders in 2018 just went through the roof.
Question from the back.
What is it? What is it, Craig? What can I help you with?
Class 8.
Class 8. So Class 8 trucks are any truck that is rated at over 33,000 GVWR, gross vehicle weight rating. So, any semi is going to be a Class 8 truck.
Oh, okay. All right.
So the Class 8 truck orders in 2018 just went through the roof. Everybody's making money, and so all of a sudden everybody wants
in.
Yeah, they want to go capitalize on that opportunity. They want to spend some of that money on trucks, and so everybody orders trucks in 2018. And so I kind of want to go through some numbers. So I've read a bunch up on this. A lot of the numbers that I'm going to be talking about I got from articles I read from Transport Topics, and they actually quote research from ACT Research, which is a pretty common researcher, provides information in the trucking industry. And so anyway, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of an idea of how much of an anomaly as far as truck orders go in 2018. So in March of 2018, in March alone, there were 46,000 trucks ordered.
46,000 trucks in 1 month.
46,000 Class 8 trucks in 1 month.
Okay, all right.
And that's a lot of the trucks, and that was actually more than double the volume of the previous March. Then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse as the year goes on. So you take August, for example. August hit a complete new record. There were 53,000 trucks were ordered just in the month of August.
Well, you're saying worse and worse and worse. That to me, that's an indication of a good economy.
Well,
People are buying trucks, right?
Yeah. So let me get to the worst part in just a little bit. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of almost counterintuitive because it is a sign of a strong economy, but I think people went a little bit overboard with the number of trucks they ordered, and we're kind of seeing the results of that this year, and we'll kind of get to that in just a second. But
Okay.
So August, 53,000 trucks were ordered, and that was a new record. The previous record for August was 29,539 trucks. So almost half of what the new record is. So the record almost doubled, and that previous record was set in 2004. So 15 years ago.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's just crazy, the number of trucks that were ordered. So it went from not just, a little bit of growth, like the freight volumes just kind of creeping along, growing a little bit. Well, all of a sudden people start making some pretty good money, and they just order a crap load of trucks. Almost 500,000 trucks were ordered in the year of 2019.
Okay.
Or 2018.
And how many drivers are out on the road in any given year?
There's a few million, but
okay. But I'm just saying that as a percentage
as a
of the
percentage,
drivers,
it's a huge
that's a lot
number
of
of trucks added. And a lot of those trucks, what's happening is the bigger fleets are purchasing those trucks. They're replacing
Their
another
older
truck
ones.
with it. They're replacing their older ones. But it's a trickle-down effect. Those older ones, all of a sudden, okay, they're hitting the used truck market, and guys are buying those up. So you're adding almost, probably not a full 500,000 new trucks in any given year, but pretty dang close to it. You're adding a whole bunch of new trucks into the market. Those new trucks are out going to find loads and wanting to make money. And so it caused a big,
it's flooding the market with new trucks, right?
Absolutely, completely flooding the market. And the thing is all those truck orders happened in 2018. Well, that's truck orders. And those orders take a while. Those trucks have to get built. They don't get built right away. And so it may be 6 months from the time one gets ordered until it actually hits the market. So
I see.
Things
Okay.
were ordered in 2018, but a lot of those trucks that were ordered in 2018 didn't hit the market until 2019.
And so that's why you're saying the rates maybe have come down a little bit in 2019 because just of the sheer volume of trucks on the road.
I think that's a huge contributing factor because the freight volume, the amount of freight that's being hauled in the country actually went up in 2019.
Still going up.
So the demand for freight went up, but the supply of trucks to haul that demand went up way higher than the amount of freight, than the freight volume, the increase in the freight volume. So it created a mismatch in the market.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like a pretty classic supply and demand thing, right? I mean, I took economics in college. I know what's going on here, Chris.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's just it's a supply and demand issue. Way more supply of trucks than there was demand for freight. Even though the demand for freight increased, it didn't increase nearly at the pace that the number of trucks did. If you hear those jets in the background, that's just the sound of freedom.
That's
right? Isn't that what that is?
That's what is it, F-22s hitting their afterburner?
Yeah, they're going. We're right outside Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and I used to live not too far from the runway, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, you'd hear those things taking off at night. They'd shake things. Yeah,
I love them.
Cool.
We usually record in the evenings when they're a little quieter.
when they're sleeping.
Exactly. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Back on topic. I couldn't not comment on the F-22s because they're awesome. So I assume that this is going to correct itself, right? I mean, it can't. Trucks will be retired and et cetera, et cetera. This has got to correct itself eventually, right? So do you think 2020 is going to be similar to 2019?
It will correct itself, and it's kind of hard to time exactly what the correction or how that'll happen. So you take, for example, so if you remember right, last year on average, almost 50,000 trucks a month were being ordered.
Right.
Well, in January in 2019, that dropped to 15,800 trucks.
Okay.
So the previous year it was 49,000 trucks in January of 2018. Now you drop all the way down to 15,000 trucks in 2019. So
it's a huge drop.
Yeah, more than a third drop. And so it is correcting itself. And it's kind of funny because you look at this and it's a lot of it's psychology, it's human nature. We have a tendency, 2018, everybody, kind of gets, gets in a little bit of a feeding frenzy. Freight rates go crazy. Everybody wants to capitalize on that. Everybody gets emotional about it. And so a lot of people go out and buy trucks because, even the big fleets, they're like, well, I want to capture all that freight. I don't want my competition to get it. So everybody adds just a crap load of trucks to their fleets to try to capitalize on that. And it creates problems. And then all of a sudden 2019 hits because you've got this flood of trucks in the market and not enough freight to keep all those trucks busy. So that causes the rates to go way back down. And now people are kind of like overcorrecting the other way. It's like driving a vehicle down the road, that overcorrection thing.
It's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah. You see, you're looking away from the road, you look down, you look up, all of a sudden you're going off the road. And so you turn way too hard to one direction. It causes a vehicle to roll. It's the same kind of thing. People do that all the time with the economy. They get emotional about something. They
react viscerally.
Yeah.
And overcorrect.
Exactly. And so that's why the economy has a tendency to, you have really good years and you have bad years. It's those corrections, overall over a long span of time, the economy gets better and better, but you've got those peaks and valleys because as humans, we have that tendency to get emotional and overreact at things and, tighten the belt, loosen the belt, tighten the belt, loosen the belt. And,
right.
It causes that peaks and valley effect.
Well, we've done quite a bit of market analysis, but I'm kind of curious about what this means for somebody looking to start their business. I mean, what I'm hearing is, hey, there's a really great potential secondary truck market now, right?
Yeah.
Go buy your truck.
Yeah. So
it's a good time.
There's pros and cons of this. So now, what's 2020 going to hold in store? Who knows? I'm kind of an optimistic person. I think as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be optimistic, but who knows what's going to happen in 2020? It's definitely not going to be 2018. Most of the research that I read says it's going to be probably still pretty similar to 2017 numbers. You're not going to see a big increase or decrease in 2020. It's probably going to stay similar to 2019, which was similar to 2017. So
not too much worse, but
not too much worse,
better.
but don't expect it to get any better. But with that being said, that whole, our Boy Scout mantra, I think we all need to be prepared. And so, we need to take into account that we don't really know what's going to happen in 2020. And so we need to be ready and prepared for that. We can't spend like everything's going out of style. We got to be careful.
I need a button here, Chris, for like a savings alert. Chris is about to talk about saving money.
Talk about saving money again. Yeah. It seems to be a reoccurring theme, right?
I need a siren or something. Okay. All right. So what you're saying is it's not going to be that much worse if it is worse. It's not going to be that much better if it is better. So where does that leave entrepreneurs, people who want to start a business?
You just have to be really careful. So let's talk a little bit about this. And to kind of highlight this, I want to talk a little bit about my experience in one of my businesses. So again, like I mentioned earlier, the Great Recession officially started in December of 2017, ended of June of 2019.
A quick editor's note, I believe Chris meant 2007 to 2009. So if you're going to email us about anything, don't make it about that. Okay, let's carry on.
And my dad and I bought Motor Carrier HQ, which at the time was Progressive Reporting Agency, in 2010. And that's kind of as the economy, is starting to pull out of the recession, but was still struggling. It was trying to get on firm ground. And many of the economists would actually argue that, 10 years later now, 2019, the economy still hasn't fully recovered in a lot of sectors to where it was pre-recession areas. I think in a lot of areas it kind of has recovered, but in some areas it hasn't. So, we bought that business when, things were kind of at the bottom, things were not great. And I think in a lot of the ways that taught me a lot of good lessons. So you take, for example, the business itself at the time when we bought it, it was owned by two older brothers. They had one of their wives working there and one of their daughters. So there were four people working there. The business had been losing about $20,000 a year each of the previous 3 years. So my dad and I buy this business that's struggling in a struggling economy. And that kind of made me nervous. But I saw opportunities to kind of cut expenses. So for that first year, instead of, 4 people working at it, was me, and then I hired one other person. They all kind of walked off into retirement When they sold, they weren't planning on working. So I hired one person. It was me and that one other person. And I didn't feel like I could hire any more people to kind of keep up with the previous workload. So what ended up happening is I worked a ton that first year, and
I'm sure
I did a lot of things to kind of improve efficiencies within the business so that fewer people could do more work. And in that first year, we were able to kind of turn things around. Our first full year in business, we were able to be profitable, which was good. But being in that down economy kind of forced me to learn a lot of principles that I still use today that have helped me be successful in that business and other businesses.
So you learned a lot, obviously. Do you, knowing now what you do, would you have done the same thing? Would you have bought a business in a down economy? Or do you think you would have had a better or just a different experience if it had been in an up economy?
I think buying the business in the down economy was actually a good thing because we got it for a little bit better price than we would have if it was in a strong economy. So that kind of was one of the things that kind of helped us manage our expenses. But a lot of it has to do with those habits. So you take the trucking industry again in 2018. I think a big part of the problem that people are experiencing now in 2019, as you're seeing trucking companies go out of business, they develop bad habits. They, in 2018, because everybody's making so much money, you could go out and you could buy new equipment. You could go out and, you didn't have to look at your expenses or control your expenses so much because you could make up for it with increased revenue. If all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to go out and buy a new truck, you could afford the payment because you could work as much as you want and you could demand high rates and you could make that work. But when you buy something in a down economy, that's really not an option. You can't do that. And so you develop habits of, how can I control my expenses so that I can make it in this kind of a situation? And then when the ball flips, and then when the coin flips,
yeah,
you could, you can kind of capitalize on higher rates when they come in because you've learned how to control those expenses. And so when the coin does flip and revenue increases a ton and you maintain those good habits, you're just going to be that much more profitable. And so I think in a lot of situations, starting a business in a down economy isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right. So from what you're saying, it almost sounds like it's better to start in a down economy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. I think you can do well in either situation, I think. It's just knowing what you're getting yourself into and being prepared for it. And so that's kind of the thing as we close out this episode. What I really want to talk about is, okay, if you're gonna start a business in a down economy, how do you set yourself up to give yourself the greatest chance of success?
Well, yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but using the habits that you're talking about in a down economy is going to give you a leg up, right? Because other people are going to be struggling if they're not implementing the same kinds of discipline, measures that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, because if you can,
could be an advantage.
A down economy kind of forces you to be deliberate in every business decision that you make, and it teaches you how to run lean and be smart about things. And so then when the economy turns around, you've already developed those good habits and you're going to be able to capitalize that versus you start in a strong economy and a lot of guys just develop bad habits. And those bad habits, as soon as the economy starts to tighten up a little bit, they can't, they're not going to be able to survive because, you experience a really good growth period and you go out and buy brand new equipment, you increase your expenses. Well, as soon as things tighten up a bit, you can't go out and sell that truck.
Right.
You can't go out and turn it back in. You're stuck with that big expense. And at that point, it gets really hard to make it work.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. So what other things would people need to think about if they're starting a business in a down economy? Because that is what we're talking about. And if it feels like we're encouraging people to just, cheer for the economy to tank, that's not what we're saying, but, take advantage of your situation. So what other things should people consider in that case?
That's a really good question. And I kind of want to talk about this. I want to take it in a direction that probably, at least initially, people aren't going to really think about. And I kind of want to use a little bit of an analogy to explain this. So You've flown on a plane before.
Sure. Yes. Not those F-22s. I wish.
Yeah, I wish too. That would be fun. I think most people have. But what's the one thing that happens every time you get in an airplane before the airplane takes off?
Let's see. Oh, the safety briefing.
The safety briefing.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And there's one specific part of that safety briefing that always kind of sticks out in my mind and kind of seems counterintuitive. You know, they talk about the oxygen mask and
Sure.
the oxygen masks drop down. And the thing that always kind of, especially when I was younger, that just didn't seem to make sense for me. It said, you put the oxygen mask on yourself before you help the little kid next to you or before you help anybody else. And, I've kind of thought about that over the years. And once you really think about it, it makes sense because, you've got to be in a good situation and to be able to help anybody else out. If you're flying at 30,000 feet and all of a sudden you lose pressure in the cabin, the oxygen goes way down, and you pass out while trying to help somebody else get their mask on, you can't help that person. You're not in a good situation. That's why you put it on yourself first, and then you help somebody else out so that you're taken care of. And when you're in a good state, then you can help other people around you.
Okay. Yeah. And this makes sense. I feel like this is intuitively true, but where are you going with this as far as your business advice?
So the same thing happens with you personally. Before you can really go out and start a business, everything has to be in good order at home. So let's talk about this first. And I think that really boils down to two things. Your personal finances have to be in a good situation. It's never really a good idea to go into business if you're living paycheck to paycheck, because you've got to have money, one, to fund that business and get it started. And sometimes you have to cut your personal expenses for a little while temporarily to kind of help get things off the ground and to support the business. And so if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you just don't really have the flexibility to be able to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like it would be good advice at any time, right? Not just a down economy.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just in a down economy, it's extra critical because there's not as much room for error when you're in a down economy. You've got to have all your I's dotted, your T's crossed. Everything's got to be tight, and there's just not much room for error. And so, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, there is literally no room for error, and you just can't do that in a down economy.
Okay.
Then on top of that, I think your relationship and you personally have to be in a good situation because, starting a business that first year is always stressful. It's always going to be hard on you. And so if your personal life is in shambles kind of in any way, then you're going to really struggle because you're just adding fuel to a fire that already exists.
You mean
yeah, it could. In that situation, hey, we can use gas there, Craig. That'd work. That's okay.
And so, yeah, I imagine if your relationship is struggling, if you're married or you're involved with somebody, then being out on the road 22 days a month or whatever it is not going to help things if it's not pretty rock solid, right?
Yeah, typically it's not. And so it's important that if you are in a relationship with somebody, you're both on board, you both know what you're getting yourselves into, you're both committed. That's one of those things that's important anytime you start a business. But again, in a down economy, it's just that much more important because a lot of the times you're going to have to make some additional sacrifices you might not have had to make before.
Yeah. This is the second week in a row, by the way, that we've gotten into like marriage counseling stuff. This is not exactly my comfort zone, Chris.
Well, hopefully it ends better than last week because I got in a little bit of trouble calling my wife out on the Christmas thing last week.
I can imagine, maybe a little. Okay, so yeah, having those common goals and both being on board, obviously that's going to be super, super important. So anything else that you want to mention as far as things to consider for a down economy or anytime really you're starting a business?
Yeah, it's really just kind of managing those expenses, and you got to be super cognizant of all your expenses and be extra careful with them. So you take, for example, when my dad and I bought Motor Carrier HQ, we got it because it was a down economy. We got it at a little better price. So that helped. In a down, when rates are down in the trucking industry, that usually means that the price of trucks is down. With all those trucks that hit the market in this last year, it flooded the used truck market, and truck prices are going down, and they're probably going to continue to go down, used truck prices. And so you might be able to get a truck for a really good deal, and that's going to reduce your cost per mile, and that'll help keep those expenses low, so that even if rates drop down, you're still going to be able to make it.
Buy low, sell high, right? I saw the movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, and there are going to be ways that people can start to track their expenses even before they get out on the road, right? They can start to use a cost per mile calculator to get an idea of what they can expect, right?
Yeah.
Some of the tools that we've got over on motorcarrierhq.com.
Yeah. So, before anybody in this market gets into things, use that motorcarrierhq.com cost per mile calculator. Just really make sure you go through every last one of those things. You've got those expenses nailed down. You know exactly what they're going to be. So you know what that cost per mile is. And if your cost per mile is $1.70 and rates right now are $1.80 and they could get down to $1.60, you might be in trouble. But if you can get your rate down, your cost per mile down to $1.50, and rates right now are $1.70, they're probably not going to move
that far
much.
Down.
And the other thing that's kind of good with this, and one advantage owner operators have, is they don't have nearly the overhead big trucking companies have. And so a lot of the times a good smart owner operator who's able to control their fuel costs, their driver costs, things like that, they can compete against the big guys because their operating costs are just going to be lower.
Right. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, all right. So in a down economy, we have some advantages. There are going to be downsides. I mean, it is a down economy. And so you've got less room for error, like you were saying, but it may be a good time to buy a truck on the cheap, relatively. It may be a good time to get some loads that you might not otherwise be able to, or that you might not if you were part of a fleet, because your expenses are going to be lower.
And fleets can't take some of those loads at the cheaper price that you might be able to. So yeah, there's a lot of little advantages like that. Maintenance costs should go down because a lot of the times in a slower economy, there's not as much freight being hauled, and so there's not as many trucks on the road, not as many breakdowns, and the repair shops are looking for businesses as well. They'll fight for each other over price on things. And so a lot of those things kind of come down a little bit, and you can manage those costs a little better, and it can be an advantageous thing. Another thing that I think is a benefit of starting in a softer economy, or should at least make it so you're not totally afraid to do that, is one of the hardest things about trucking, when you're getting started, is finding freight for a brand new authority. And you're typically, even in a really strong economy, because you're a brand new guy, you're not going to be able to get the best rates. You're not going to make a whole lot of money anyway. And so if you can go through that first year period when things are already down a little bit, you're typically not gonna, you're not sacrificing those big profits because you're a small guy, a new guy. So if you do that when the economy is a little bit strong anyway, you're operating at a time when you're probably not going to make any money anyway. And then when the year or two passes and things recover and the economy gets good, you're established. You've probably got some direct relationships, and you can really at that point start to make money versus, jumping in when the economy's strong for the first time and being forced to be on those lower tiers because you're new and nobody's going to give you those higher rates.
Right.
Does that make sense? I feel like I rambled a little bit there, Craig.
No, I think it makes sense to me, and your experience may help to illustrate that and bear that out with, when you purchased that business 10 years ago. So, and I would be curious to hear what other drivers' experiences are, if they want to hit us up on Facebook or HaulinAssetsLLC.com. If you're an owner-operator already, when did you start your business? How did it go? How was the economy, and what sort of adjustments did you have to make either way? And if you're thinking about starting a business and you're worried about the economy, I'd love to hear people's specific questions about their situations and see if we can address some of those.
Yeah, that'd be great. We can address them on the website or on Facebook, or even some of them we might address in future podcast episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully you will all visit us there. Search Haulin Assets on Facebook. Find us at haulinassetssllc.com. We do actually read those comments you leave.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So we will see them, and we would love to hear from you, especially on this subject. So, Chris, we feeling good today?
Yeah, let's maybe just summarize it a little bit. Tell me what you got out of it, Craig.
So what I got out of it is a down economy, or a questionable economy like we have right now.
There's a lot of uncertainty.
Not quite sure where things are going to go. It scares a lot of people into not wanting to take the risk. They feel like it's a huge risk to start a business, and now's not the right time. Let's wait till things are really great. But that may be not just... It may be ill-advised, right? If now's the right time, now's the right time, and you can work with a down economy.
You can work with a down economy. I think that's kind of the point is just because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and the economy may go down, but that's not necessarily a total disqualifier, because there are advantages. You just have to be careful about what you're doing. You have to be a little more deliberate. You have to be more conscious of everything. And it's probably more important than ever that your personal financial situations in a fairly strong spot. If you're already kind of teetering on the edge, now's not the time to do it.
Right. Okay. Absolutely. Well, I feel inspired, Chris.
All right.
Even though cable news tells me that everything's fine right now, it's fine. Okay, Chris?
Yeah. Allegedly.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We hope to see you on social media and elsewhere. HaulinAssetsLLC.com for show notes and comments. Chris, I guess I will see you next week.
Yeah, we'll if not see me talk, for sure.
Welcome, everybody, to the Haulin Assets podcast. This is episode 30. Today, we are talking about starting a business in a questionable... Let's try that again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets...